Hi there. I've come up with a cunning plan to rebuild Ukraine. It won't cost us a penny and it will allow us to resolve a number of issues. This all started because I find the principle of a Western politician ruling us to be abhorrent. Someone owned by the people with the money that pretends they're acting on our behalf. And this goes to the heart of the flaw in democracy, which is that, well, two flaws. Firstly, the people that own the politicians, own the media, sell us their narrative. 80% to 90% of the people believe it. And because we're a democracy, that means that whatever narrative the elite choose is the narrative that's official and accepted and becomes policy. Well, that's not really democracy, is it? That's autocracy, with compliant serfs voting for the people that are owned by the elite. So no, that's not really democracy. A democracy in my world is when an informed people monitor and control the government. An autocracy is when an uninformed people are monitored and controlled by the elite. Which do you think more accurately describes what we're living in? So the first flaw of democracy is that it's a sham just by its very construction. As once you have a few elite controlling the narrative. The second element is the hypocrisy that is built into democracy, because it's the best, it's the good way of government as opposed to dictatorship or any other, has to have a white hat. So it doesn't matter what the elite actually want to do and what their greed and what their sociopathic agenda is, it has to be framed to the mass in white hat mode. And so basically they lie, they cheat, they lie in their own pockets, they spin. So it's hard work getting to, not that very hard work, to be honest, COVID, Ukraine. But sure, we actually have to, when they announce something, we actually have to go and find out what they're really doing and what they really want and what the real story is. So we kind of have to work at it. By contrast, in a dictatorship, it's so much easier. Saddam Hussein says, you stole our oil, we're invading. And Kuwait was cross-drilling, basically tapping into Saddam's bank account, his oil. And the West airbrushed the Kuwait stealing the oil and said, ooh, Saddam bad. Kind of interesting echo versus the current situation in Ukraine, isn't it? But yeah, it's like Putin, China, it's like, we're doing this because nobody can object, they're in charge. End of. It's a lot easier. And you can assume that both the West and the East, Far East or anywhere, they're always acting in their own self-interest, they're always acting to enrich themselves, they're always acting to do what's best for them, not what's best for the people. It's all the same mechanism, Rome 2, 3 or 4. But at least with the dictatorship, you just sort of, yep, we don't think that's right, but you're doing what you're going to do. Got it. With the West, you have to kind of dig in and do the research. Dig in and do the research and find out what the real story is. But of course, that's a waste of time because the 80 to 90% buy the narrative and then attack you for being a conspiracy theorist, and the elite get their narrative, so it's a waste of time. And I was reflecting on the idea that what we need is a Disneyland Ukraine. Massive tourist draw, bring in the money, wonderful. But, there's been some issues with Disneyland, getting some bad press. And what actually might be an enjoyable fantasy world, which is, after all, what Disneyland is, an enjoyable fantasy world that we could install in Ukraine, and have the world be a better place. So let's look at a few things. One of the things I have is that, as I say, I loathe the idea of a politician, basically a paid puppet, being in charge, and in the West any more than as the actor Zelensky in Ukraine. And we look at how many young leaders there are, mid-30s, 40 years old, placed in power, raised by the Klaus Schwab, the leaders of tomorrow. They aren't real people. I mean, I'm not saying they're clones or anything. I'm just saying that they didn't grow up in mining towns, in trade unions, working to defend the people. They didn't have to build a business and get past all the government regulation and actually make jobs available for people, and enrich themselves off the back of it. No, they just attended a few classes, the Klaus Schwab classes, and then they're put in power, which is why they all have this smug smile of like, we know how the world really works, we know how it should be run, we have the answer, and how dare you accuse us, how dare you challenge us? You're an NAZI, a Canadian trucker, apparently oblivious to the fact that Canada was training real NAZIs, and it was like, well, we can't know who we're training. Right, that's why you have military intelligence. So you get all these young leaders put in charge, they're nauseating. Even the older generation leaders, they're equally bought, the Boris Johnsons of the world. The ethical, I fought my way up through the system, and this is, my loyalty is to the people. I mean, I don't know if there are any of those anywhere in the world. Farage sort of looked good in Brexit, but he's been totally pro-agenda in COVID, and he's been totally pro-agenda in Ukraine. So, no, I don't think there are any legitimate politicians out there that actually, their loyalty is first to the people, not to their pocketbook. Same with corporations, same with universities, same with anyone in a government position, same with the billionaires. I mean, we basically have a completely messed up world. And, it's fine, God's will, all the rest of it. And if you don't mind God, I'm just going to do my best to get us out of it. So in our fantasy world, let's figure out a name for this. And the first Epcot section, well, of course, if we're going to do Epcot and science, of course, we could have the pharma exhibit, showing all the doctors and scientists being funded, plugged into the pharma world and spouting whatever pharma wants them to say. But what other sort of areas would we have, and how would we name this Disney World? Well, let's look at Her Majesty the Queen. Now, to some, she's a lizard, alien. Well, I don't know, maybe, who knows? So I'm thinking Disney World, which kind of also works given her Christian name. So, what the hell? Disney World. And the thing about these leaders, the thing about HMQ is that millions of people every year come to Britain to take a look at Buckingham Palace and buy flags and t-shirts, whatever. I think that's wonderful. So the idea that they would come to visit Boris Johnson land, I think is absurd. So why don't we just keep HMQ and the tourism and all the rest of it, but just like a zoo, this is what we really need. You don't go to a zoo or you don't run away from a zoo because it's got lions and lions can eat you. No, you go to a zoo to look at the lions. You love it. So what we need is a zoo, only because it's going to have humans as the exhibit, Disney World, so we can have the world leaders exhibit. Not the politicians, they're not the world leaders, we know that. So we need the world elite exhibit. And we can have HMQ, the Vatican, the R&R families, whatever, and you can watch them sitting, in their mansions. You can have like miniature replica mansions, and they can sit at their tables and dine, and we'll feed them just like a zoo, because you want the exhibit to be alive and healthy and well, and obviously we wouldn't want to give them an internet connection or access to any of their minions. That would be rather foolish. But yeah, let's have, all these people that we know that own the world, they can be in the world elite section. Then next to them we can have the richest people in the world that are visible. The Queen's very visible, but you have to be one of us to realise the threat, what she really is, whatever that is. So then we can have an exhibit for the CEOs and the owners, the Vanguard, the BlackRock, the Big Pharma, the military-industrial complex, and we'll have a thing there where they come out with all these things that are going to threaten you, and they jab people, maybe jab each other. That'd be quite entertaining. We'd have to give them saline syringes, obviously, for safety, for health. And they fire at each other. They create these wars, and they fire at each other with, I don't know, paintball guns. Yes, interesting. Poor old Reuters got a bit of flack for showing Ukrainian fighters bravely defending against Russia with paintball guns. Bit of a miss there, Reuters, but don't worry about it. But of course, yes, we should definitely have an MSM section where all these people just receive the daily script and then put it out there, put on their suits, and we can have them. We can look at them. All the whatever they call them, talking heads, chatting away, telling us the script of the day, and while we laugh, and maybe Ant and Dec can come up with some scripts that are appropriate. And so we can have all of these different areas, and the important thing is that if we can sort of get them into this Disneyland, into this park, and keep them away from actual levers of power and money, we're safe. We can actually leave it to the rest of the world to get on with being human. And ultra quickly, because I'd hate to offer a totally ludicrous solution without having an actual practical solution, that in order for this to be possible, obviously we need to start somewhere. And somebody sent me an excellent video on localism, which very much mirrors my insight that I had from ironically, the I am perspective, which is that if you require people to treat you with courtesy and respect, and you make that your core rule in dealing with people, if you first have I am, and you respect yourself, you decide for yourself what's true in life, and then after that, in terms of other people you work with, you insist upon courtesy and etiquette, which is my one red line, for example, on Facebook. What would happen if you and your friends insisted on courtesy and respect? You stop thinking of telling them how they should think, and you stop tolerating people telling you how you should think. You just insist on courtesy and kindness and respect. And what if that became how your village operated? And what if that became how your town operated, your city operated? So that when somebody came up for mayor, you required those characteristics. When somebody came up for governor, you required those characteristics. When someone came up for senator, or however it works in the US, or an MP in Britain, you required those characteristics. They didn't get away with fraud and lies and whatever. No, they had to respond to what you wanted and what you needed, and they weren't allowed to just spout and implement their agenda. And then what happens if the politicians and governments aren't allowed to operate from anywhere but kindness and decency and respect? It gets a bit harder to run false flags. It gets a bit harder to foment war in other countries. And it's totally absurd. Except all it requires, it really only requires one or two things. Firstly, as I say, firstly it requires it requires that you respect yourself as being supreme, dominant, willing and able to think for yourself, form your own opinions. Second, you treat people with kindness, courtesy and respect. The third element is one of financial independence from the agenda. So that might be voluntary taxation, it might be having a localized economy, whatever. But you don't need them and you don't finance them. That would be, that would hurt them or hit them where it hurts. Trivial, no. But it is a conceivable way out. And, once we get to the point that they're thrashing around, their agendas are failing or whatever, then, I'm just giving you a sense where we can put them. Well, maybe Ukraine, Disneyland, and we can all go and visit and point and laugh and cheer and scream. And it's just an idea.